Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to another Business Vision webinar, and welcome to everybody who's attending today. The webinar should roughly last about 35-45 minutes, but as with all of these, might be slightly quicker, might be slightly longer, depending on how much I waffle on. I'm Mark Lawson, and I'm Managing Director of Business Vision. We're a firm of accountants in Plymouth, and we specialise in business growth and also helping businesses with their profit growth, sales, etc., as well as just doing the boring stuff, which is accounts. So today we're looking at the impact of cloud technology. And if you've got any questions, you can basically contact us through any of the following methods. You can also type questions in down the bottom right of your little control panel, but chances are I won't get to actually answer those during the course of the webinar, but we will come back to you by email if you've got any questions. Failing that, I do recommend you visit the website, which is on the screen now. Also, previous webinars and loads of other useful stuff is on the YouTube website, and if you've got any specific queries, then email and contact details are on the screen. Okay, let's just go through roughly what we're going to go through today. We're going to look at what the cloud is. There's a lot of misconceptions about what it is, what it does, so we'll just quickly cover that. Then we're going to go through the interesting bits, which is why I think it's now become a big buzzword and becoming a lot more popular with businesses, small businesses particularly, how you can use it, what sort of methods there are, the things that you can do that you might not have thought of. And then I'll just give you a bit of a practical explanation of how we're using it as a small business, just so you can get an idea of where it can take you. And also we'll then go through the best bits, just to basically show you which bits we think are really great out there. Okay, first thing I'd just like to caveat is, unlike some of the webinars where we're discussing sales and marketing, profit growth and stuff like this, this is an area where I would profess not to be an expert. I'm not an IT expert, I'm not a cloud technology expert, and that will become very apparent fairly quickly on, I would imagine. But that doesn't stop us going through it. It's a big subject, and it's one that we embrace totally and look out for areas with our clients so that they can use it, save time, move things forward. So it's an area we've looked at long and hard, but as I say, not an IT expert. I would also say that the webinar itself is not intended for IT and web experts. So if you're basically already very, very familiar with this, applying it and maybe even using it for your own clients, then you might find the level of the webinar slightly lower than you would want. So if you do drop out for that reason, then no problems at all. So my main aim with today is to not give you a complete grounding in the subject because it's huge, but really just to start opening minds and ideally getting the spark of a conversation going with you and whoever's the most appropriate person, whether it's your own accountant, your IT department, your web provider, or indeed us. Then that would be the next stage. But we're certainly not going to cover every angle of it today. We're just going to give you a bit of a taster and hopefully get you thinking that this is really, really relevant to you, and hopefully, like us, find it quite exciting. Okay, so first question probably we need to go through is, what is the cloud? Well, in basic terms, it's the storing of programs and data using the internet. So probably not overly exciting and probably not a million miles away from something you're very familiar with, which is the internet generally. But the movement is more away from your desktop technology where you typically keep programs, keep all your data. It's a move away from that and storing them on the internet using somebody else's server space, not your own. And we'll go through in a bit more detail later how that actually works. But it's important to realize that cloud technology isn't technically that new. I'm old enough to remember when we were doing things before computers. We started off with just paper ledgers as accountants, recording everything on little cash-coded pieces of paper. And then fairly early on, we came across word processors, which were a bit like a typewriter, but they had a little bit of a hard drive in them, so you could start to save templates. And then after that, obviously, came personal computers, and then from that, websites, email, and now the cloud. But the reality is that cloud technology, using the cloud, started back in the 60s, where computers were like the size of a whopping great room, and big companies couldn't afford to store big computers that size or have the room to do it. So they rented computers off some of the big computer technology companies at the time. So it's not something new, but the application to small businesses certainly is. And it's become more popular more recently in the 2000s, with obviously the advent of things like iCloud, Google Apps, Dropbox. All those things are starting to become day-to-day processes that we're familiar with. And there is a huge surge in the number of cloud applications and programs, and we'll touch on some of the best ones of those a bit later. So it's not completely new, but I think the application and the reason for small businesses getting involved now certainly is. Okay, so why cloud computing? Well, here's some of the sort of key points I would suggest that make sense to me. It's an awful lot more flexible than just using a PC with a monitor and, in a bigger business, connecting all the individual people up to a business server that's kept in a server room, etc. So a lot more flexibility. It's more secure, and usually one of the problems we get with cloud, discussing it with clients, is that their first problem is it safe, is it secure? Well, the reality is that the people who are operating on the cloud, certainly the best of them, are going to have far better security and encrypted systems than you and your business are ever likely to hope for. And it always makes me laugh a little bit when we speak to clients and we say, well, what's your backup program for your computer accounting records, which might be kept on a PC? And they happily show me a USB stick, which all the data is copied onto, just one copy. And then I ask, where's that kept overnight? And they say here, next to the computer, which basically means if there's a fire, both the original computer and the backup go down at the same time. And also, most PCs are very easy to get into from anybody who wants to, from a security point of view. So security, I hesitate to say is perfect, because recent years have shown that nothing's completely perfectly safe. If people can hack into FBI, then it's a bit dangerous to say that everything's safe, but it's certainly thousands of times safer than information saved in your server and your PC. Cheaper, so I think there are lots of ways that savings can be made with this. Primarily, servers may well be getting ditched, and servers are obviously very expensive. They have to be upgraded every so often just to make sure that they're not going to conk out, and also because they're usually not big enough after a while. So you're effectively using other people's costs to some extent, so I think it can be cheaper. It's a lot more open, and by that we mean that because somebody else is operating it, it will interact with lots and lots of stuff, and primarily we're now talking about phones and tablets, clearly. So rather than just your server communicating with your PC or your staff's PCs, it can now interact with any number of different gadgets and technology wherever they are, and that's obviously going to be far more useful. And it's also, to some extent, not completely obsolete proof, because again, if you think about it, all this data and storage is taking place in some big corporations' server, and many of the bigger ones, when we say their server and people go, where is it? A lot of the bigger ones, certainly banks, Xero, who I'll talk about later, have these in basically deep underground bunkers in the west coast of America, usually duplicated in two big bunkers, one in the north of the USA and one in the south, just so if there is a nuclear strike, that they've actually got two big bunkers, and if both of them are hit, then I suspect the last thing we're going to be worried about is our cloud data. So obsolete proof, because the technology is being run by these cloud companies, not by us. So it's going to be upgraded all the time, and servers will be upgraded, server speed, server space will be upgraded all the time. We don't have to do that anymore. Another reason why you can't ignore it is simply because it's gaining pace. Recent stats show that 50% of all data, that's all data in the world, will be in the cloud within 5 to 10 years. So increasingly the data is moving away from being personally held to being held by third parties, and we've seen examples of that with Facebook data, with accounting data being held, banking data being held in the cloud, and obviously a lot of our personal storage. A lot of our photos and music and books are now held in the cloud, waiting for us to draw it down to use. 75% of businesses already use some form of cloud platform, whether that's their bookkeeping system or whatever. So it's becoming very popular, and it is a $100 billion industry already and growing. Predictions say from 2015 to 2016 by 26%, which is a huge growth. And obviously where there's huge growth, lots of businesses are going to be jumping in, and that means more choice and more flexibility for us. So hopefully that's given you a little bit of encouragement that it is something that's going to be happening. And just some examples of how that's manifesting itself day to day, and the way things are moving, I think, is most people have used or do use Microsoft Office. It's one of the biggest software providers over the last couple of decades, and increasingly they're moving to Microsoft 365, which is their cloud-based version of Microsoft Office. So if you use Microsoft Word, increasingly you'll be encouraged to actually pay a monthly subscription to have that on the cloud. It is a very, very similar piece of software, but the big difference is where is it? On Microsoft 365, it's actually held on their server and you're effectively accessing it, not on your server. Sage 50, one of the biggest bookkeeping software programs of the last couple of decades, I believe it's on its way out and being replaced by Xero. Xero Bookkeeping is in the cloud, only is in the cloud. It doesn't have a PC-based program at all. And I'm going to be talking about that a fair bit because obviously that's the most relevant to us as accountants. Things like USBs and hard drives as storage devices are being replaced by iCloud and SkyDrive, the Apple and Microsoft versions of cloud storage. And that's obviously a lot secure. It means that if your computer gets broken, you haven't lost all that data. It means you don't have to move it from computer to computer when you change them, and it's ultra secure. Emails are gradually going to be replaced for various reasons with, I think, online secure portals, and that's already happening. Email basically isn't the most secure of communications, and in the States, quite a large number of the United States are actually making it illegal to send financial information by email. And that's probably going to be something that will come over here, which affects us because it means we can't, any longer send out tax returns and accounts by email. We'd have to find an alternative. So we have computer programs, the things that sit on your computer, are being replaced by online apps. It's the only method that things like iPhones and iPads work with. But increasingly you won't have the need to store huge amounts of computer programs, which is great because it means you don't have to upgrade your hard drive on your computer. And with all of that, there's a movement from outright purchase because we're no longer needing actual programs and downloading them. We're now moving on to a monthly subscription base, which makes sense, I think, both for the supplier and us as consumers. For us, it means we've got a regular budget. We aren't going to suddenly find that the size of our server is not enough and we have to spend $3 or $4 grand buying a new one. It will just be a monthly subscription and we'll know exactly how much that cost is so we can budget. From a supplier's point of view, monthly subscriptions make their business far more valuable than hoping that somebody's going to come along and upgrade. So a lot of changes already in place moving forward. So let's just look at how you can use that technology. Again, not going to be looking at this in vast amounts of detail, just give you a flavour. The first one I've already touched on is bookkeeping. Bookkeeping for us is eminently moving forward from the old days, which, hate to pick on Sage, but Sage were the biggest players in the UK market, and most of our clients who are on computers for bookkeeping use it, or did use it. And the process with Sage, if you think about it, is we want to, let's say, answer a query. So they ring up with a query about something in their figures, maybe their margins are looking a bit odd or whatever, and they want us to check that out. Well, that's not something we can do immediately. What they then have to do is to download the Sage data onto a backup. That backup then needs to be sent in to us. It won't normally be emailed because the size of the data is too big for most email platforms to collect. So to drop it into the office, we have to then take that USB stick, plug it into our Sage and upload it, all the time making sure that the version of Sage is the same, because different versions don't communicate easily with each other on Sage. Then we answer the query by looking at that data, go back to the client. All the time that's happening, the client can't use Sage because they can't change their data if we might be changing it here. And then eventually they can crack on having got the answer. Well, that's changing with a program called Xero, spelt, as you can see, Xero, and it's all on xero.com. And the benefits of that is it's in the cloud. So long as we've been given permission by the client, we can actually see everything that they can see. And in some cases, if we've set it up, we can see even more than they can see deliberately. So if they ask a query about something, we can go into exactly the same part of the program online as they can. So we could be talking over the phone and both looking at the same thing instantaneously, and even changing the figures. We can go away and change those figures 5 minutes later after the phone call's ended. Doesn't mean the client can't be doing their own stuff in different areas of the program at the same time. So that could take 5 minutes because it's on the cloud and accessible to everybody, whereas with Sage or other computer programs that could take a day, 2 days to get one simple query answered. And at the year end, obviously, similar problems. The client wants their year end books done, so they have to basically get everything finished on their computer. Usually there's only one program, so that means everybody who's working on it has to come into that office and work on it. Then it has to be downloaded, sent to the accountant for the accountant to work on it. Now, for the 3 or 4 weeks, with some accountants even longer, that the accountant's working on it and possibly making adjustments, the client can't do any bookkeeping. So suddenly they're behind with their accounts and their bookkeeping and can't move forward. So clearly not an ideal situation. And Xero gets around all of that because it's accessible online instantaneously to everybody that's been granted access. Financial data. So financial data can be moved from app to app. And what this means is that we can now access programs that can access your bookkeeping data a lot more efficiently and quickly than we've been able to in the past. It's not presenting us with new things to do, but it's certainly presenting us with quick and easier ways to do it. So, for example, we wouldn't just prepare a set of accounts and say, there you go. We'd want to analyze them and work out exactly what's going right, what's going wrong, what's changed over the last 5 years, what worrying signs there are, what trends are going the right way, the wrong way. Now, that can all be done from a PC-based bookkeeping system, but increasingly there are programs that will collect that data from the online cloud bookkeeping, so particularly Xero, and present it in a way where a lot of that work's been done for us. So all we need to do is interrogate that new financial data and make sense of it, and then work out what to do next. So financial data easily transportable between different programs. Previously, it either couldn't talk to each other or it was very difficult to. Debt collecting, a lot of movement on debt collecting programs now, because again, those debt collecting programs can access your bookkeeping data with your permission, clearly, but it can do things like access the list of your debtors, find the names and go and do some credit checking, so telling you whether there's any particular risks associated with it. It can automate emails of different types at different stages to those clients, and it could in some cases even collect the money from them at the same time. So the whole debt collecting process can't be delegated completely, but it can certainly be delegated to a large extent to a program, and that obviously is far better for debt collecting where things happen consistently and regularly, which they usually don't do with internal human beings doing it. It's also going to be a way of replacing or changing the nature of our servers in the business. So I've got a little graphic that illustrates how that effectively works, where all the main tech structures and IT equipment is effectively held by some other company in the cloud. So they've got all the high-tech stuff, they've got the servers, obviously high-speed servers that are replaced regularly. Usually the data is duplicated, tripled, so that there's ultra security, and that information on the desktop in the cloud is then filtered through to wherever you want it as the end user, and that could be to your printer, to a phone, tablet, PC, the Teams PCs, and that means that the amount of tech that you've got actually sitting in your office is a lot lower, because all the server end to it is effectively outsourced to the cloud. And I think that means that fairly soon, and we are seeing it in bigger businesses already, if you've got a couple of people in your office, what they won't have is a huge server sat in another room and their PCs linked to it with loads of cables going around the wall. What it means is they'll just have a very small hard drive, if any, because they need somewhere to put a little bit of information and to download data, possibly from USB sticks, but it won't be very big storage space. And they'll have typically 2 to 3 monitors and no server, and increasingly a dedicated printer. So what's going to sit on an office-based worker's desk is going to be different. And it also means that people who aren't office-based, so tradesmen, can still access all this data through their tablet. It's all going to be Wi-Fi and not cables. So I think the whole desktop scenario is going to change dramatically. Other areas we can look at are obviously storage. So because the servers are no longer in the offices, then the storage problems become a thing of the past. You can just save everything in the cloud and draw it down whenever you need it, knowing that it's ultra safe. And I say we're already doing that with things like Kindle books, photos, movies, and everything else is basically held somewhere else, ready to be drawn down so that we don't need huge amounts of space. Data transfer, I've already mentioned that moving data around is a lot easier to do and allows us to do a lot more. There's also some great apps and software coming out on the back of cloud technology, which I think is a huge step forward, and I'm going to give you a flavour of some of those in a moment, just so you can see the potential. Online diary bookings, for example, is one that's now becoming quite popular. One of the bigger ones is called myoffice.net, but there are loads of them around. And for us, although we're not using it yet, that gives us the ability to have people just going into the cloud, seeing everybody's diary, can see mine, can see all the other members of the team, and they can see the slots and they can book in diary times, half an hour, hour. It will be prompted for them to say a little bit about what the meeting's for, and it will then confirm that, and we can even set that program up to send them reminders by text and or email so that they don't miss that meeting. And that can all be done automated without having to go through PAs or coming through to me, and less chance of people forgetting. Another completely different usage that's cropped up over the last 5 or so years, which we're heavily involved with, is cloud borrowing, although it's also called crowd borrowing because crowdfunding is one-to-many. And the way that works broadly, if you think about it, is that in the last 10 years, certainly since the recession, people who've got loads of money are getting very, very low interest rates on it, so they're not particularly happy. And people who are trying to borrow are finding it very difficult to borrow because banks still aren't giving out much more money, and that used to be one of the only ways they could get money is go to banks. So a whole online program's cropped up, and the biggest one is called Funding Circle, but there are quite a few now. But Funding Circle, I think, was the first. And the way it works is through a cloud platform, all people with money register their interest. All people with businesses who want money register that they want money, upload their business plans. The people who run the platform, who are typically ex-bankers and merchant bankers and city people, will then grade those business plans from a credit risk point of view and indicate that online, and then the lenders will make a decision as to whether they want to lend money based on that credit rating and the type of business. So they'll get a lot of information, but they won't get involved in the business at all. They will know the business name, but the business won't know the name of the person lending. So they'll put offers forward, usually not big offers. So maybe if you're looking to borrow £40,000, the lenders might offer 200 quid. But the point is that there are hundreds of thousands of these people online. So very quickly you can build up enough £200 offers to basically get the lending that you need. And then simply once you're happy with that and the interest rates that have effectively been offered by the lenders, you can pick the lowest interest rates of all the lenders. So if you get twice as many people as you need, you pick the lowest half, and then you indicate online that you accept it, and the website people collect all the money from you, pay it out to the lenders. So a very, very efficient way of, to a large extent, cutting out the middleman using the power of the cloud. Also marketing, obviously we're quite familiar now that marketing takes place not so much with post, emails and flyers, although in my view that's still the best way to do marketing, but you've now got the added ability to do marketing through the cloud, where programs and apps will control that for you. So key ones are Infusionsoft, Salesforce and MailChimp. MailChimp is the one we use, and they effectively can control a lot of that. So with MailChimp, for example, we would upload all the names of leads and clients. We would upload the information that we want to send out from a marketing point of view and tell MailChimp when and how we want it sent out. MailChimp will do that without us getting involved any further, and then it will report back for all of those people as to whether they actually opened the email, if they did, how long it was open for, and whether any links within the email were clicked. It also then reports back and says this is possibly a better time of day to send those emails out in order to get more of them opened. So a huge amount of marketing data, which is always very useful, and less time. Obviously, the quality of the marketing emails is still down to us as businesses, but a lot of the actual logistics of it are handled in the cloud. Okay, so that's some of the applications, by no means all of them. So let's say there's hundreds of other bits you can do, but I'm trying to pick out the ones that are most relevant to most small businesses. So let's just have a look at some of the better ones that are out there so far that we've come across. And if you are getting into the cloud and cloud technology and you've come across some great applications and programs in the cloud and I don't mention them, then I'd be very grateful if you could email me details so I could check them out if I don't already know about them. So there are tens of thousands, so I'm only going to cover some of the key ones in some of the key areas. Xero, I've already mentioned briefly, but if you think about it, this was something waiting to happen. With bookkeeping, what used to happen is the bank kept all its data, your data, on its computers, and then from a bookkeeping point of view, they had to send you a sheet of paper called a bank statement to tell you all the transactions. You then had to give that to your bookkeeper so that they could type all those details back in to another computer with Sage Bookkeeping on it. And then because of human error, you then had to basically go through and check all of those items against your bank statement to do what's called a bank reconciliation to make sure that your computer now shows all the same balances and figures as the bank's computer. Well, huge amount of work effectively duplicated, and that's now no longer needed because Xero is the first cloud bookkeeping platform to take the data direct from the bank straight into the bookkeeping software. So usually with the press of a button, although in some cases not even with that, all the bank transactions since last time will appear magically in your bookkeeping system, and all you need to do, you don't need to do a bank reconciliation because it will agree with your bank because it's come straight through without any human interaction. So it will agree, no bank rec required. You just need to tell Xero what those transactions relate to, although in many cases Xero actually works that out for you. So a large part of those transactions, they're actually going to suggest what needs to happen with them within the bookkeeping system without you having to do anything other than clicking a button that says, okay, do that. So a lot of time saved with that and a lot more accurate. And I'll just show you a screenshot in a moment, but basically all of it's on the cloud, so everything is accessible to anybody. You can give people permissions, so you can have some people just basically doing the sales invoices and people like accountants able to do everything. The help from Xero is free, so that's all built into the system, and the upgrades are numerous and many, and there's no extra charge. It's a monthly subscription. And I mentioned Xero because we obviously deal a lot with accounts and bookkeeping, so it's relevant, but it's also something that every single business has to deal with. And the previous most popular was Sage. Sage 50 has been the market leader in the UK. It's not very well known anywhere else. And this year in the UK will be the year that Xero will exceed Sage in terms of businesses using it. And in my view, that probably means that Sage, because it has no international profile, won't last much longer than 4 years. That's my personal opinion. It's not something that's generally out there, but I think that's the view, and it's certainly my view, that Sage is built on an antiquated platform, and I don't think it will be around too much longer. And Xero's already huge in New Zealand and Australia, which is where it came from. So I think probably very quickly the biggest market leader in bookkeeping, and for good reason, because it is very clever. That's just a screenshot. Not sure how well you can see that on your computer. That's a screenshot of a demo company. That's the front page, the dashboard, as it looks in Xero. I've just cut off the toolbar at the top, and most of what you need to do can be done from that page. You can see that there's all the transactions from the business bank have suddenly appeared, so you need to go into that and just tell Xero what it is. You can see all your bank accounts. You can see a rough guide to cash flow, bottom left. You can see some of the most important accounts, top right, to see what's in there. So it's not all of your accounts, but it's certainly the ones that you'd like to see regularly without having to go somewhere else and find it. Typically for our clients, the sales figure's usually there. The director's loan account showing how much they've spent personally would be there, and maybe a few others. Maybe accountancy fees might be there as well. It's also got spaces showing a overview of money owing and money owed, and you can drill down. And one of the benefits of Xero is that everything is accessible from everywhere. So where it says under the account watch list that advertising and marketing is being kept an eye on, if we actually wanted to find out a bit more information as to what's actually in that, you just click on that. Anything with blue is a link. And rather than go into another part of the program and actually find what's been put to advertising and marketing, you click on that and it will take you straight to it. So a very, very sophisticated piece of software in my view, and of all the clients we've got now using it, most of them, if not all of them, think it's the best thing since sliced bread. Very excited insofar as you can get excited about bookkeeping software at all. But it's not designed by accountants, it's designed by programmers, and I think that's partly why it scores so heavily over Sage and others like it, as well as it obviously being in the cloud. This is another screenshot which just illustrates how easily certain things that can happen. There are other programs that do this even better, but given that this is in your bookkeeping automatically, this is another screen that measures all the key numbers from a business performance point of view. You may not know what they mean in every case, but there are explanations and accountants can help you. But things like current ratio are numbers that banks look at when they look at your accounts. Things like net profit on your sales is very important. Things like the level of debt. These are all key numbers, and you don't need to now go out and get an expert to work these figures out for you at the end of each month. They're there daily, hourly, updated as much as your bookkeeping is up to date. This will be, and it's available as a screenshot. You can play around with it, drill into it, and that gives you a huge amount of data and information about your business that you would never get that quickly in the old days. Another benefits with Xero are that things like invoices can now, rather than take your invoices for supplies and overheads and type them in manually, those can now be entered into zero in several ways. One is you can get your supplier to email them to a special email address that you own, and that would automatically then be entered into zero. You can scan them through a high-speed scanner with some other software that we have and we use, and that gets scanned into that program, and from there goes straight into zero. And if you think about it, that takes very little time and also eliminates human error. It does optical character recognition, which means that if a human was entering it, say in January, they might well type in the wrong year because the year is fairly new, which means it's going into your bookkeeping system 12 months old, out of date. So the 2015 invoice is entered as 2014, and that causes problems because scanning it and optical character recognition being applied, there is no human error possible. It will recognize the name of the supplier, the date, the amount, and everything perfectly every time. It will even spot whether it's duplicated. So that's hugely beneficial, and linked in with that is the benefit that all those scanned and saved invoices or receipts can be stored within the bookkeeping program, which is no longer a storage problem because it's not your server it's being saved on, it's somebody else's. So the storage space, not a problem. And that fairly quickly, and in some cases is already happening, means that, for example, if you get a VAT inspection, whereas before you'd have to get out every month's folder of invoices going back 3 years, you'd have to print out all the printouts from Sage because they can't access it, and loads and loads of other data, and you'd have to be watching over them. Now you can simply give them access to your zero and say everything's in there, copies of the VAT returns are in there with the breakdown of how the VAT returns are worked out, and in all the things where it shows how the VAT returns worked out, every entry has the original bit of paper attached online, so you don't need to go any further than the PC. And that isn't just great for obviously VAT inspections, it's great for the business generally, because if you're brave enough, it means you no longer need to have loads and loads of files clogging up all the shelves, and eventually meaning you have to move offices because there's so many years bookkeeping on the shelves. It might take a bit of time for that to become accepted enough that you're prepared to ditch all the actual real paper, but I think that's the way things will go, and that makes huge sense to me. Another example would be that business directors and employees are now able to photograph expense receipts. So let's say a tradesman's out and he has to buy some sandwiches for lunch, or has to buy a couple of batteries or whatever, they can simply iPhone photograph that receipt, and that receipt would then immediately go into your bookkeeping software and get shown as something that you need to reimburse to that employee once it's been improved, and the details on that receipt are automatically entered into the bookkeeping system. So I think very exciting times for bookkeeping. From that, there's some other software. This is just two of the main ones we use, called Fathom or Crunchboards. They both do a similar job, where these programs will interrogate zero bookkeeping, pull out all the relevant information and provide them to you in a way that tells you exactly how your business is doing, and allowing you to have conversations about what you need to change, what's working and what's not working very quickly. It still needs a little bit of interaction from accountants, but this is a screenshot. Again, it won't be very clear, but effectively daily, monthly, the software will pull the relevant data from the bookkeeping and tell you how you compare to your targets. It will tell you how you compare to the previous month. It will tell you whether you're over the targets you've set for yourself. It will tell you whether any of the numbers are below a level that could be dangerous. And all of that's available. There's a lot more on these particular programs. I haven't been able to obviously go through every bit. This is another part of Fathom, where effectively once it knows your numbers, you can then start to ask it how you achieve a certain number. So on the screenshot there, it says my profit is 15,192 this month. I'd like it to be £20,000, and then the program actually sets out what things you can change and by how much to get that profit, and you can start to use sliders to come up with some sort of plan. So it won't usually be one thing in isolation, it could be 3 or 4 different ways of making more profit, but that can be done within the space of minutes whereas before that could easily be a 2-day project for some consultant. So Fathom crunch boards certainly, I think, sit alongside Xero and allow us to do some very clever work for clients, which is what we've always wanted to do, rather than just presenting accounts and saying there's your figures and clients don't understand it. Go cardless and directly tend to work together, and that allows businesses to get paid by people who have credit cards, etc., when you don't necessarily have a credit card machine. And with directly, that basically allows collection of money by backs, by direct debit or by credit card, all of which will then be fed through into your bookkeeping system to mark off that particular bill as being paid. So a lot of stuff now being done on the cloud that used to be only available from banks. If ever you were trying to get a direct debit system set up with your bank, you'd need several £1 million worth of turnover before they'd look at it because of the dangers inherent within that system. One I particularly like, Trip Catcher, that basically helps with my mileage claim. All I need to do with the app is enter in the postcode of the destination and the source location of my trip. It then basically works out from the internet how many miles that distance would be, works out what my claim is based on the inland revenue rates, and the best bit is it then puts all that straight into my Xero bookkeeping as a business claim, so I don't have to enter it into my bookkeeping. And just to show you how far these things can go, there's a program called IFTTT, which basically says, if that, then this. So what it's basically saying is there are loads of menus that you can set up that says, if this happens, then I want that to happen. So an example would be, if I put a document in Dropbox, then send me an email reminding me to follow it up. Or if I actually put a photo on my Facebook to my online storage space. So almost anything you can think of that says, if this happens online, then I want the computer to do this. The possibilities with that are endless. And that's just starting out, so that's going to be very exciting. And other things that can be done that we've seen businesses use is online quoting systems where you use templates. Very clever and modern thinking quotes are being sent out through the cloud, and the client can accept them through the cloud as well. Workflow processes, some very good apps for planning workflow, different stages of jobs and projects. CRM systems becoming very much cloud-based these days. So very quickly, I'll just run through how we're using the cloud within the business. We have, and I think this is going to become a lot more common, is we have a way of communicating with clients. We still communicate by email, but with more important documents or where the client wants us to, we have a portal online which is very secure called DocBox. So that means that we can send tax returns, for example, into DocBox. The client won't then get an email with that, but they'll get an email saying there's something there. They can go in and have a look at it and see the tax return. More importantly, that tax return will be saved there forever and a day. So if they need to revisit that in 2 years' time for mortgage purposes or whatever, it will still be saved there as their document. Also, that gives us the facility to get digital signatures. So because it's in the cloud, we can get a digital signature where the client can sign it just by ticking a box to say they've reviewed it in DocBox, and we then get an email back saying it's been signed. So in the space of, if we wanted to, 30 seconds, we could have sent the tax return to the client, got them to review it, got them to sign it, and be submitting it electronically to the revenue rather than sending it by snail mail, and that might take a week or longer. With Xero, we're obviously doing a lot more monthly in terms of either doing actual bookkeeping, because it's a lot easier and cheaper these days for us to do it that way, or helping clients get decent, accurate monthly figures by them using Xero. And already we've got about 1/3 of our clients on Xero, and the target is very quickly we want as many as possible. We can then direct them to their key numbers using Fathom and other pieces of software, and more importantly, I think, start looking at things like how do we get better monthly profit growth, what's working, what's not working. So we're telling you why your figures are what they are and how to improve them, rather than just what the numbers are, which isn't much use and never has been. So that helps us do what we consider to be a proper accountant's job, very efficiently and cheaply compared to how long that would take in the past. For our actual accounts work, we use a cloud-based system called Workpapers. So if any of you have had accountants meetings, you may well have seen a 3-inch thick file that they bring to that meeting, which is where all your workings are for that 1 year's accounts. Well, we now do all this digitally, which allows us to send any questions about the accounts through the DocBox system, where the client will just get an email with a link to all the queries so that they can answer that at their leisure. And a lot of those will be set out in such a way that it will say this only needs a yes/no answer, or when I'm talking about this particular schedule, here's a copy of it for you to look at. When we send out checklists just before the year end saying all the things we need to do the accounts, that will also be done through Workpapers, and clearly the Workpapers link to Xero, which means that within our file we can effectively see everything that's in Xero, so we don't need to print it all and shove it on a folder anymore. Another cloud application clearly is webinars. We're in the cloud doing this webinar as we speak, so you can be sat at the comfort of your own office or home with a PC, and using the cloud technology we can have this webinar together. Increasingly, we're increasing the number of monitors, so everybody now has 2, and I can see that very soon becoming 3, because it means we can look at different things all at the same time. One screen would have the data, the second screen would have the program that we're moving it to. So that is going to only get bigger, 3-4 monitors. Very easy to do, very cheap, and very effective productivity-wise. VPNs, that's private networks. That's basically linking up different computers to each other. That allows us to do things like work from home, allow staff to work from home, allow subcontractors to work on different bits, and it also allows us to take over clients' computers if we need to do something on it or show them something. Surveys, so typically main survey program is SurveyMonkey, which we strongly recommend. That can all be done through the cloud. The answers are done through the cloud. The program then collects in the cloud all the answers and gives it back to you in a format that actually does all the data mining so that it gives you all the answers and all the implications of that survey without you having to work it out on Microsoft Excel. And we have cloud software that clients now get free of charge when they sign up. One of those is a huge sales and marketing system which has loads and loads of ideas on how to do sales and marketing. That's all available in the cloud, free to any client, and that system retails for £497 a month, so they get that free. And also they get a System Builder, which is another cloud-based program, which is where all the systems are maintained. So things like standard letters, complaint systems, etc., are already designed for clients in many cases, but are stored in the cloud. And that means that if you've got, let's say, an electrical company and they've got tradesmen out in people's houses doing electrical work, they can see what the systems are to do what they're doing on that program without actually having access to a computer at all. And that means they'll do it the correct way, and they'll do it the quicker way without having to ring up or find out or go back to the office to find out. We're also obviously on social media, and that's becoming a huge thing now. So we are on LinkedIn, and if you do regularly attend seminars or webinars, then please do go on there and add some testimonials would be great, or link up with us if you're not already. We are shortly about to promote the business Facebook page. There has been a presence, but it hasn't been used much, but increasingly Facebook is going to be business orientated and providing you with a lot more data for advertising. So you can go into Facebook and advertise to very, very specific segments of the market. So if you want somebody who's earning over £100,000 who lives in the PL postcode with a property worth more than £1 million, and they've got an interest in horses, then that can all be done now through Facebook and very, very cheap advertising to very, very specific types of people who are more likely, obviously, to buy. Twitter, starting our Twitter account shortly. That seems to be, again, something that businesses increasingly are getting used to. And we already have a YouTube site, as I mentioned before, that's got loads and loads of free videos that if you haven't seen already, I strongly suggest you go and have a look. So, next steps. In terms of how would you take all that information, and I repeat again that that is really just the tip of an iceberg of a very big subject. But my main aim is to get you interested to see how there are some applications at the very low level of businesses that can make some huge differences and start to investigate it more. So I would suggest that your next steps are to review Xero. I do strongly advocate Xero. I think it's one of the best things that we've come across from an accountancy point of view and bookkeeping point of view in many years, and I am a great fan of that. So do look at it. You can have a 30-day trial. Doesn't come through us, it's online, just to see, play around with it. And there is a whole demo business which has got real data that you can mess around with. And then I'd suggest you speak to the next relevant person, which could be your IT department about where you go, what you do. It could be to your IT supplier if you haven't got an internal department, or it could be your accountant or us. Any of those or all of those should be able to help you move forward and embrace this technology, which I think is going to be hugely beneficial to businesses. It may not ultimately save time because computers never did, but what it will do is in the same time give you an enormous amount more done and more information to plan where you're going with your business. So I hope you found that useful, and I hope that if you have got any questions, you can either send them in or ring them through, and we'll try and get back to you on those as best we can. If you're looking for suggestions or recommendations, then we'll happily have a chat about that. But for now, that's the end of the webinar, and I look forward to seeing you at future seminars or webinars, or contacting you, speaking to you about the subjects. So thank you very much for attending today, and take care.